never trust an empty well. They remember. They listen. They wait for footsteps and names. The sun was already dipping toward the horizon when Isaac Johnson crested the final ridge. Below stretched the land that was now his, at least on paper. Dry grass spread in brittle waves. Old fence posts leaned like broken teeth. The place looked tired, stripped bare by time and wind. They had called it free land, a gift, they said. But Isaac knew better. No one gave away good earth for nothing. In town, the men had whispered warnings. Even the poorest settlers avoided this property. One word kept returning to Isaac's ears: the well. Don't go near it, they said. Been dry for years, but it ain't empty. Then they'd look away, as if ashamed of their own fear. Isaac didn't believe in curses. He believed in hunger, debt, and the bitter weight of failure. Those things were real. He had lost his first farm to drought and creditors. Lost his wife and children, too, when they went east to live with her kin. Now he rode alone, with nothing but this last chance clutched in his calloused hands. His old mare snorted beneath him, weary from the long ride. Isaac patted her neck. "Almost there, girl," he murmured. As they descended toward the ranch house, the ruin revealed itself piece by piece. The roof sagged like an old man's shoulders. One shutter clung by a single hinge, tapping softly in the evening wind. The barn was little more than blackened beams. A place once built for life now stood like a monument to abandonment. And in the center of it all, half hidden by shadows, was the well. Its stone ring was crumbling. The wooden cover had collapsed, leaving a dark wound in the earth. Isaac's eyes kept drifting toward it, though he told himself it was foolishness. He dismounted and tied the reins to a weathered post. The ground felt strange beneath his boots, too soft, like it had been disturbed. He pushed open the section of fence. Each swing of the hammer was defiance. Defiance against poverty, against doubt, against the neighbors who rode by watching him with pity or worse, curiosity. He ignored their warnings. But the well. The well was harder to ignore. By the third night, Isaac's resolve cracked. He tied a rope to an old bucket and lowered it into the darkness. The rope rasped over stone, then went slack. When he hauled it up, the bucket was heavier than before. Inside lay an object he did not expect. A small copper lamp, blackened with age, cold to the touch. Isaac stared, heart pounding. He had expected emptiness. Instead, he had pulled a secret from the throat of the earth. And the well, it seemed, had more to give. The lamp was heavy in Isaac's hands, too heavy for its size, cold as if it had never seen the sun. He carried it inside and set it on the broken table. For a long moment, he simply stared at it, afraid to touch it again. Then, with trembling fingers, he pried open its corroded base. A bundle of blackened cloth fell out. Isaac unwrapped it slowly, layer by layer. Inside were folded sheets of thick paper, yellowed and fragile. He spread one across the table and froze. It was a map. Not of the surface, but of what lay below. Lines like veins snaked across the page. Some tunnels branched outward, others curved back on themselves. Symbols marked chambers deep beneath the ranch. Faded notes sat beside the lines, numbers, arrows, military-style markings, and dates, decades old from the time of war. Isaac's mouth went dry. This land wasn't just cursed, it had been used. Someone had built something down there, and someone had hidden it. For 2 days he worked above ground by day, studied the papers by night. The drawings hinted at an entrance near the old barn. Isaac remembered how the soil there had felt softer than the rest, almost hollow. On the third evening he could resist no longer. He gathered a lantern, gouges deep in the stone. Collapsed crates lay in the corners, their wood eaten by insects. Rusty fragments of tools littered the floor. Isaac crouched and picked up a broken leather strap. The buckle crumbled in his fingers. Everything here spoke of desperate work done long ago. Then his lantern light struck something strange. At the far end of the chamber stood a sealed wall. Unlike the rough stone around it, this was smooth, deliberate, carefully built. In its center, scratched faintly into the mortar, was a single symbol, an arrow pointing down. Isaac set down the lantern and raised his crowbar. He pried at the stones. They resisted at first, but age had weakened them. One block came loose, then another. Dust billowed into his face, making him cough and blink. Finally, the gap widened, revealing a hidden space beyond. Isaac crawled through and gasped. Wooden boxes lined the chamber in neat rows. Their lids were stenciled with faded symbols. Isaac pried one open. Inside were rifles, dozens of them, their barrels gleaming faintly under layers of dust. He opened another box. Gold coins spilled into his hand, heavy and cold, stamped with strange markings. And beneath the treasure, wrapped in oilcloth, were ledgers, names, numbers, payments. Records of a network that reached far beyond this lonely ranch. Isaac staggered back, breath ragged. This was no mere hiding place. It was proof of power, corruption, and blood. Then a sound shattered the silence. A deep, groaning crack above him. The ceiling shifted. Isaac lunged for the opening as a section of roof collapsed behind him, burying half the cache in rubble. Choking on dust, he crawled back through the tunnel, clutching a handful of papers. When he finally emerged into the night, he fell to his knees, gasping. Behind him, the hatch stood open, whispering cold air into the dark. The well hadn't been empty, and now, Isaac knew, entered the store. A boy whispered, "The gold man," before darting away. 2 women pretended not to stare. Isaac felt heat rise in his chest. Had someone been talking? Or did rumors simply grow on their own, like weeds? Outside, he caught fragments of a conversation. Under the barn. Best leave him be. When he turned, the men who'd spoken were already walking away. Isaac rode back to the ranch, heart pounding. The air felt wrong, as if the land itself was holding its breath. That night he barely finished his chores before darkness fell. He bolted the door and sat with his rifle across his knees. The dog whimpered low in its throat. Hours passed. Then, a distant sound. Hooves. Slow. Measured. Coming closer. Isaac's grip tightened on the rifle. Through a crack in the shutter, he saw 3 riders emerge from the moonlit hills. They rode into the yard without a word. Their silhouettes were stark against the pale light. One man wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. Another had a coat too fine for a simple ranch hand. The third carried his rifle openly, resting across his saddle. Isaac stepped onto the porch, rifle at his side, though not raised. The man in the fine coat spoke first. His voice was smooth, almost friendly. "You've taken possession of this land," he said. "Thought we'd stop by. Offer some advice." Isaac said nothing. "This isn't good soil," the man continued. "Nothing grows here but trouble. Better to pack up and leave while you still can." Isaac's jaw clenched. "This land's mine," he said finally. "Claimed it fair and legal." The man smiled without warmth. "There are things buried here that don't belong to you. Things men have died over." His tone shifted, softer, more dangerous. "Hand over what you found, and maybe you'll get to leave alive." For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the night. Even the dog stopped breathing. Isaac's heart pounded, but his face stayed calm. I left. He didn't work the fields anymore. There was no point. The land wasn't for planting now. It was for surviving. The dog paced endlessly, hackles raised, pausing only to growl at the barn or at the well. Each time, Isaac's heart sank deeper. He couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were always on him, just beyond the horizon. As twilight bled into darkness, he sat on the porch with the rifle across his knees. The moon rose, pale and distant. A cold wind whispered through the broken fence rails. Then he heard it. The faint thud of hooves, far off but closing in. Not 3 this time. More. Isaac stood and moved to the window, keeping low. Torches glimmered in the distance, weaving through the dark like restless fireflies. 6 riders. Maybe 7. They came slow and steady, like men certain of victory. Isaac's mouth went dry. He whispered to the dog, "Quiet now. Stay low." The dog crouched beside him, trembling but silent. The riders dismounted in the yard. Their boots crunched in the dirt. Torches stabbed orange light into the night, throwing wild shadows across the house. Isaac peered through a crack in the shutter. He saw their leader, the man in the fine coat, step forward. "We gave you a chance," the man said loudly, his voice sharp now, stripped of charm. "This is your last." Isaac stayed silent. "Hand over what you found," the man shouted, "or burn with it." The torches lifted higher. The first shot cracked the silence. Wood splintered beside Isaac's face. The dog barked wildly, lunging against the door. Isaac dropped to the floor, fired once through the window. A scream answered him, followed by shouts and the pounding of boots on the porch. The front door shuddered, then burst inward under a heavy shoulder. Isaac fired again. Another cry, another man down. They spread out, some circling to the back, some climbing through windows. The small house erupted into closed in, broken only by the faint glow of fire filtering through the cracks. Voices followed. Boots clattered on the ladder. Shouts echoed down the tunnel, closer and closer. Isaac's breath came in ragged gasps. He ran, satchel thumping against his side. At a narrow bend he stopped, placed his hand on a sagging timber. Waited until he heard the men behind him. Then, he swung his crowbar. The wood snapped. The ceiling collapsed with a roar of earth and stone. Screams were swallowed by dust and silence. Isaac staggered forward, coughing, blinded, but alive. The tunnel ahead remained clear. When he finally climbed out of the northern exit, he collapsed onto the cold ground. Above him, the sky stretched endless and black. Behind him, the ranch burned, orange flames devouring everything he had built. There was no going back. The house was gone. The barn was gone. But the satchel of papers, the truth, was still in his hands. Isaac rose slowly, his legs trembling. He turned his back on the fire and began to walk. Into the darkness. Into the unknown. Into the next fight that awaited him. Isaac didn't stop running until dawn. The eastern sky glowed faint red, a thin promise of daylight. His lungs burned. His boots were torn. The satchel of ledgers banged against his hip with every step, its weight both curse and salvation. Behind him, smoke rose in a dark column. The ranch was gone. Everything he had built had burned. But the truth, the names, the records, the proof, had survived. He stopped by a shallow creek to drink. Cold water eased the fire in his throat. As he knelt, he saw movement on the distant ridge. Riders. Too far to count, but closer than he wanted. They were hunting him. Isaac splashed his face, wiped his mouth, and pressed on. He kept to dry gullies and rocky trails, places where hoofbeats could not follow. He avoided towns, slipping past at night like a shadow. Shouted for officers. Within hours, the storm began. The papers spoke too clearly to be denied. Warrants were issued. Judges stripped of rogues. Merchants led away in chains. Even federal agents, once untouchable, were dragged before the courts. The network unraveled, thread by thread. Corruption that had stretched across the territory was exposed to the light. Isaac watched from the edge of the crowd as powerful men fell. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from relief. For the first time in years, he felt the heavy weight of silence lift. The government recognized his role in the discovery. They granted him full legal claim to the land. Coin enough to start over was placed in his hand. A small reward compared to the danger he had faced. But to Isaac, the true reward was the letter he sent east, summoning his family home. Weeks later, a wagon rolled into the valley. Isaac's wife stepped down first, eyes weary but bright. The children followed, running to him with laughter that cut through the ghosts of the past. Together they stood on the ashes of the old house. Together they began to build anew, walls rising from ruin, seeds planted in soil once poisoned by secrets. The land seemed to breathe again. The air felt lighter. Even the well, now repaired and filled with fresh water, stood silent and calm. Sometimes Isaac would walk to its edge and stare into the depths. He half expected to hear that faint, metallic hammering again. But the well only reflected the sky, silent and still. On warm evenings, he sat on the porch of the new house. Children's laughter drifted across the yard. The stars wheeled overhead like guardians. The gold was gone. The rifles were gone. The papers were locked away where no shadow could reach them. Isaac understood now. The true treasure wasn't wealth. It was the courage to face darkness and refuse to bow. The land that everyone had feared now belonged to him. not because of what was buried beneath it, but because of what he had unearthed within himself.